So I think the first thing to get clear is that, and the two authors, Cicada and Toynbee, dwell on that point for a time in their discussion, that the learning and education are two different things. And it is important to understand this. Education, if you look up the dictionary, which I did, education is shown as systematic instruction, schooling, or training in preparation for life or some particular task. Scholastic instruction, bringing up. That's what the Oxford Dictionary says about education. But under the verb to educate, it has slightly narrower meaning. It says to train, to discipline, so as to develop some special aptitude, taste, or disposition. So what's missing from the verb to educate, but is included in the general word education, is training in preparation for life, which of course is particularly important from the Buddhist viewpoint of the word education. So learning, on the other hand, is a self-motivated thing. You can learn yourself without a teacher. Education, you need a teacher. But learning, you can tackle it yourself. You can learn from books. You can learn from observing the actions of others. You can learn from your experiences of life and so on. So, my mother, for example, never, except for one weekend in Paris, in her whole 94 years of her existence, traveled abroad. But from the earliest days I can remember, she always insisted on absolute quiet at a particular time in the afternoon, and she read good books, travel books, biographies, all sorts of books. She always had books that she read for that hour every day, of 7 days a week, for as long as I can remember. So as a result of that, even though she'd never been further than one weekend in Paris in her whole lifetime, she could hold her own with anybody in conversation or discussion about the state of the world, the state of this country, about politics, anything. That was purely her desire to learn. I believe it was self-motivated in her case. I think really she had two boys, myself and my brother, and I think she felt that it was her duty to educate herself in that way so that she could help us to understand the world and understand life. I think that's why she actually did it and became absorbed in it, of course, in the process. So that is learning, a self-motivated thing. So therefore, taking that on a little further, education may be only for very short periods, mightn't it? But learning should be for a lifetime. Learning should never cease, even, to the last few days of one's life. If one's sensible, one can still be learning. So this is why in the Gosho, Nichiren Daishonin said, didn't he, rather strict words, he said that unless people have seeking minds, they're no better than animals. And when you think about it, that's true. Because the mind, the ability, the free will of the human being to seek knowledge or seek experience is a priceless treasure of human life, isn't it? Unless you fulfill that, you are no better than an animal. Unless you put that ability to learn or for learning into action. So they're strict words, but they're very true words, like everything else Nichiren Daishonin says. They're straight from the shoulder. It is, in fact, the essential difference of a human being from all other living beings. So you remember last week I talked about the ingredients of wisdom. We sort of think of wisdom as being just the Buddha wisdom that we practice to activate in our lives. But in fact, wisdom has those two other ingredients, which one's life absorbs. One is learning, and the other is experience. And you can readily understand that unless wisdom is blended with your knowledge of this world and your local circumstances and experience of life, if you bring it up from your life and want to use it, it won't be applicable, will it? To your particular circumstances, which is what wisdom is for. Not just for theory, it's for action, isn't it? For reality. Therefore, we absorb learning and we absorb experience, and it blends with our wisdom. And through chanting Daimokkha, we then bring that up. Perfect blend to be able to apply the Buddha wisdom to our own particular individual circumstances and problems and sufferings and difficulties. Is that clear to everybody? So what comes from all this? Big point. Education is in a terrible state in this country. It's been getting worse and worse for some long time. And interestingly enough, it's also in a bad state in many other countries as well. Education, just like everything else, hasn't adjusted itself to this modern age. It's confused and mixed up by the technological revolution, and it's been distorted by it. But in fact, the central point, Buddhism would say, to education is that the good teacher actually encourages the development of the desire for learning in the hearts of every single one of his pupils. That should be the task of the great teacher. Whatever level of education or educational establishment he or she may be teaching in, to develop that desire to learn more in each single pupil. Of course, they may have certain specific things that have to be taught, such as mathematics or whatever. But behind the mathematics, behind the algebra, behind the history, behind the Latin, should be the desire of the teacher to encourage in each single pupil the desire to learn, the fascination, if you like, of learning about life in all its aspects. In other words, to open up the pupil's vision beyond the narrow confines of some specialist subject and open up a broader outlook which wants to learn about everything. So this was the greatness of Mr. Makiguchi's theory of education, which was really the central point of it. He said, half a day at school is enough. And in the primary school, which was his testing ground, if you like, for his theories, a small primary school in the countryside in Japan, he just had half a day. And the rest of the day, the remaining half, pupils spent outside in the environment of the village in which that school was situated, learning how the village functioned, where the food came from, where the manure came from that made the food grow, right? Every aspect of social life, political life, economic life in that simple community area of a village. The students studied, and Mr. Makiguchi made sure that his teachers in that school related also whatever they were teaching, whether it was Latin or math, in some way always to their local circle. So his theory was that if a person becomes fascinated, if a child becomes fascinated with how their village works, then the next thing they'll want to know is how their prefecture works, or county, or part of the country, north of England. And the next thing they'll want to know is how the whole of Britain works, and what its place is in Europe and in the world. And always they'll be wanting to go on outwards to feed themselves with more and more understanding until they begin to reach a point where they really understand their place and the place of their community in the world as a whole. So this is part of the Soka educational system, started by Mr. Makiguchi, and of course based on the profound principle of Buddhism, which is called Esho Fumi, the inseparability of oneself and one's environment. So how can you have an educational system that is boxing off everything into little neat boxes or files, right? And is not concerned with the whole? Because our lives, whether education likes it or not, are concerned with the whole, aren't they? This was what Mr. Makiguchi's principle was based on. So as I said earlier, for education, you've got to have a teacher. And, of course, the great example of that, from our point of view, practicing this Buddhism, and members of SGI, was the relationship between Mr. Makiguchi and Mr. Toda, and Mr. Toda and Sensei. Mr. Toda taught Sensei all he could, but also he drew out of Sensei's life the desire to learn. So that after Mr. Toda died, indeed before that too, Sensei was developing a stronger and stronger appetite for learning. And Mr. Toda, as you know, encouraged that in many different ways, leading him or asking him to read certain books and so on. So Mr. Sensei often refers to Mr. Toda, doesn't he, as his mentor. Really, Mr. Toda entirely educated Sensei and got him to a point where he knew Sensei would continue to educate himself. So in my case, I was very fortunate too. I've had three mentors in my life. First one was the history master of my school, Dulwich College, a man called Mr. Gayford. He was an absolute marvelous human being. And when he taught history, he taught it in a way which related to the circumstances one found oneself in actually at that time. He made the whole thing live, and he made history my favorite subject because of that. He was a great human being, and he wanted to see all the members of his class great human beings too. There's no doubt about that. So I'm really thankful to him. That was when I started between the age of 12 and 15. And then about 10 years later, from 22 to 25, strangely enough, the other was 12 to 15, when I look back hearing this lecture. And another mentor. I was by that time in the army, and he was a brigadier of all things. We were stuck in the jungles of Burma. Well, not stuck exactly, trying to move in the jungles of Burma. And often there was time, especially in the monsoon seasons, when you couldn't move and you just stuck there. And somehow or other, we had a great relationship. He'd talk to me about life, about everything that he'd learned. He was a great man, good man. He taught me about caring for others. He was a very popular leader, a man who had a broad view of life and who believed in all the human beings who were his responsibility, how to look after them. I can't tell you what this man taught. It's impossible to even imagine, but an incredible lot. He was a real human being again. Also, he taught me about initiative and leadership, and he was of inestimable value to my life. So that's the second person I'm deeply grateful to. Then I had to wait 30 years wandering around in the wilderness, if you like, until I found Sensei. When I was 52, I actually became Sensei's disciple. When I was 52 years old. So 12, 22, and 52. Strangely important days or times for me. And Sensei then became my master of life. I had learned everything in Buddhism. My understanding of Buddhism is totally through him. Not through him talking personally to me, as I've often said, but through really reading his guidance, studying it, putting it into action, chanting Daimoku to be in rhythm with him, wanting to be able to anticipate all his wishes, and live a life for Kosanufu, which was in perfect, or as near perfect as I could get it, rhythm with him. So that's my life, and I think I've been very fortunate. So to have a master of life is very important. There's no doubt about it. So anyway, the point is, you're all quite young. You've got to prepare yourselves, really, to be mentors to lots and lots of other young people in the future. We're sitting here with an NSUK, which is on the way now, including Naitoku, on the way to becoming 4,000 strong. But in another 20 years, it's going to be very big. So we need lots of mentors, potential mentors. I hope that by that time, each one of you will know certain young people who somehow can really relate to you. You can really relate to them. And you teach them, please, everything you know. Because that's how this incredible heritage can be passed on, isn't it? So learn all you can while the going is good. So I suppose to put it in a nutshell, you could say education is to lead us, or should be to lead the pupil to search for the meaning of life, and also to discover the right way to live. That is the way Keda and Toynbee finally summed it up. Education should be the impetus to lead us to search for the meaning of life and to discover the right way to live, to be invaluable. So now looking at a little closer at education today, first of all, you've heard me talk about it before because it is a bee in my bonnet. It has been for years. But what we suffer from today is specialization. We've lost the great minds. It's very difficult to look round and find people who you would say had great, incredible minds like Dr. Toynbee. They're not so common as they used to be. And we're all suffering from this specialization or channeling in education, where you're dropped into a channel of whatever it is, the age of 11 or something or other. And that's where you stay, no matter what changes go on in your life. And even when you finish school, you stick in that channel because that seems the best way to earn the best sort of money. And if you hop out of that channel, you'll find it difficult to get a job, and so it goes on. So this is the main, in my opinion, so far as systems are concerned, this is the main problem we have. Specialization, which in turn, of course, is geared to government policy, which is concerned with mostly economics. So, Robert, maybe you could read a passage, page 61, right at the very bottom.
Right, this is Professor Toynbee speaking. In the age of technological civilization, education in the right way to live needs to be supplemented by vocational training in special branches of knowledge and kinds of skill. But before entering his profession, everyone who has received professional training ought to take the Hippocratic Oath that is prescribed for entrance into the medical profession. Every entrant into any profession ought to pledge himself to use his special knowledge and skill for serving his fellow human beings and not for exploiting them. He should give his obligation of service priority over his incidental need to make a living for himself and his family. Maximum service, not maximum profit, is the objective to which he should dedicate himself. Ikeda, you are quite right. By devoting itself to a utilitarianism that overemphasizes intellectual knowledge and technological skills, education in modern society has had two major bad consequences. First, by making learning a tool of politics and economics, it has robbed learning of its inherent dignity and independence. Second, people engaged in learning and education become the slaves of intellectual knowledge and technological skill, which are the only aspects of learning prized today. As an outcome of this trend, respect for humanity declines. In short, today people are compelled to serve intellectual knowledge and technological skill, which are in turn controlled by politics and economics.
Makes one think, doesn't it? How can we get back to the situation which definitely did exist in many schools 50, 60 years ago, where teachers desire to see their pupils become great human beings? Because mostly, of course, there are great exceptions. I'm sure there's at least one exception, if not more, perhaps even in every school. But in a general sense, that's not so. I discovered the interesting thing about mention of the Hippocratic Oath. Is anyone here studying to be a doctor? Because I hear now the Hippocratic Oath isn't taken anymore by doctors. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Christopher Boy told me the other day. Incredible to me. I think that's a terrible sign of deterioration. What does it mean? What must it mean to abolish the Hippocratic Oath? If that's really true, I kept on asking Christopher. I said, I can't believe it. And he said, no, it's true. Because the Hippocratic Oath was nothing more than to serve humankind and put the service of humankind first before everything else. And we all know, I'm sure we've all met doctors who really lived by that. Amazing people. Of course, we've also known doctors who haven't lived by it. But what does it mean when a thing like that is abolished? Terrible sign, isn't it, of deterioration, don't you think? Really shocked me. However, that's so. So that's happened since this book was written. I think Christopher said about 8 years ago it was abolished. I don't think it received much publicity. I never saw it anywhere. Cowardice, isn't it? Absolute cowardice. Incredible thing. Anyway, I hope in your lifetime you'll see it back again. I'm sure we've got quite a number of students entering the medical profession. So let's say they do really great things. So if a person is a teacher, that is the Buddhist aim, that they should try to draw out the desire for learning, the desire to become great human beings from all their pupils. And I'm sure Robert could talk for hours on this, because I know that the education group, it's the background to everything they do, really. And many of them are proving the possibility of it, even in the unruly classrooms of today. Then, of course, there are parents who also play their part in education and learning. Parents who should do their best to find there should be a system which permits them to find schools which are best, they believe, for their particular children. One school may not be suitable. Even in the same family of two brothers, one school might be unsuitable for one, yet very suitable for another. Parents should have their say in such a thing, and for them not to have it, of course, can only lead to a feeling of helplessness or irresponsibility so far as the education of their children is concerned. So, of course, so far as members are concerned, they have the confidence to be able to make those decisions about the best school for their children. So in Japan, they have a huge social problem where young children are at the mercy of the ambitions of their parents. It's the in thing to have brilliant children. Also, of course, get the best sorts of jobs in Japan, you've got to have the right sort of letters after your name. So there is all this one-upmanship goes on to an acute degree. Probably many of you have heard or something about it, but I mean, children are subjected to unbelievable cramming. They may get up at 4 a.m. in order to travel an hour to get to a crammer's, and then they go to school, and then at the end of the school day, they go to another crammer to cram another subject or another group of subjects. It's unbelievable. So this is why child suicides have one of the strong reasons why child suicides has grown so much in Japan. It's a tremendous problem there. And it's nothing else in the end but to please the parent, with absolutely no concern for the child. Well, that's Japan's problem. We've got our problems too. So then, if we look at ourselves in the light of education and learning, which we all should do, and I think we all do, in fact, quite naturally, once we start to practice this Buddhism, it's amazing how many people who, probably past the age for normal university entrance, who suddenly feel after a couple of years' practice, I think I really must improve myself in this particular area or that area. They decide to go to a university, to do a postgraduate course, or to polytechnic, or to do an open university course, and so on. It's wonderful. I think, of course, that is the Gohonzon saying, if you're going to have a happy life, if you're really going to be able to lead play a fulfilling role in it, then at least in that area, it would be great if you could really master it. Or it may be that they go in order to get a greater general knowledge. So anyway, whatever happens, the message behind all this, Buddhist message, is we should never give up. We should always be trying to improve our learning and through that, our understanding of life. So it's now 2:00. I would think it's a good time to have a break. It's a good time to do it, Robert, or should we be doing it later?
No, better. There's a bit shorter second half if we start.
How would you like a break? I think a break now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Great.
Great. Thank you very much. So, thank you.